I'm not like I think you are a great player, and I believe that you'll make an impact on the team, coming into this program. But I'm not promising you a starting spot, and I'm not promising you playing time, because what you did in club, when you come to preseason, what you did in club is not going to matter. So, I want to look for a player who's coachable. How do they respond to their coaches? How do they respond to their teammates? How do they react when they make a mistake on the field? Things of that nature. Does one mistake they make turn into 3, 4, 5 mistakes, or are they learning from that mistake and improving and progressing and getting better? And also, when their teammates make a mistake that they may not agree with, are they yelling at their teammates? How are they responding verbally to that?
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with Coach Luca. Over the last few weeks there have been some top class episodes. Well, all of them are top class really, so you should be enjoying them all and taking away as many notes as possible, as well as reflections. I'm having such a great time talking to all the guests who appear on the podcast, and there are so many great up and coming episodes that I can't wait to share with yourselves as well. However, in this week's episode, I'm delighted to welcome head soccer coach of the women's programme, Ebony Campbell. It was great to speak to Ebony because she is the third coach in 2 years at her institution, and it was how that reflects, how that impacts that transition of philosophy, style of play, framework, the integration of players, the systems, the connection, the transition of players and how that may have impacted them, the different types of recruitment, working with the board to support that. There is so much that comes into play when there is such a turnover of coaches, especially in such a short space of time. And even when you're a head coach, because of that accountability and everything that you bring and want and that you want to instill, that definitely changes within itself as well. Now, the institution, in terms of any organisation, could then start to shape the programme a little bit differently because of the changeover in staff, and therefore they want to streamline it, slim it down, and make it more accountable, being more systematic in its functional approach because of the changes in coaches, before allowing those coaches to express themselves because of the different changes that they've had and maybe the inconsistencies for their players. So there is that consideration, being the third coach in 2 years. We spoke about having a 25-player squad and the size of that, the rotation, the minutes, the players, selection processes, how pre-season is set up. And it is such a great time speaking to Ebony because she has such a wealth of knowledge and what she wants to instill within her squad and support on the programme. Within this, we spoke about the coaching journey, transition to head coach, player development, philosophy, style of play, player focus, recruitment, and reflections along the way. Now, here is a great quote from Ebony. I want to look for a player who's coachable. How do they respond to their coaches? How do they respond to their teammates? How do they react when they make a mistake? Now, that is such a great quote within itself with so many key questions, because that gives reflection points for the coaches, gives reflection points for the players. It creates an awesome discussion which you can have within that collective unit. It gives so many considerations, analysis, details, and also allows you to consider that work on the grass that you're doing with them, as well as off the field, to develop that mental framework. So by asking these questions, and what does coachable mean? What does a coachable player look like? Does a coachable player for you look different to what it looks like to Ebony? Or are there considerations that Ebony has which you can take into yours? Now, being coachable is a very a big consideration in terms of what we talk about in terms of individuals, humans, working with players, working with professionals, working with those that we might mentor, and how can we ensure those coaching outcomes are instilled and met. But those responses are really important, especially amongst to coaches, to professionals, to line managers, to peers, to those players around you, to your teammates. And all this comes into consideration of the team dynamics, those relationships, the building blocks, the trust, and everything that comes within that philosophy, which is really critical to that player development piece, and that transition in head coach and how you instill it to ensuring that player focus and how the style of play supports that, but having that recruitment at the heart of it is really important, and also that recruitment and not writing off players. There are so many key considerations within this episode and so many key questions. I had such a great time speaking to Ebony, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I have, and continue to add to your notes, continue to add to your reflections. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Twitter, LinkedIn, Flickr, and TikTok. Now, you can definitely watch the episodes on YouTube and Spotify, as the video versions are now uploaded to Spotify. If you could drop a like, drop a follow, drop a comment, and drop a subscribe amongst all of the socials, especially Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn and Twitter, that would be really helpful. It is at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It's the Reflective Coach everywhere else. I'm Anthony _ Luca 96, as you can see on screen. But don't forget, every time you drop a follow and subscribe, it really helps the podcast. Now, this is a top episode, as it has been over the last few weeks with every guest that I've had. But I think that of every episode, because every guest has allowed me to get to this point, and every guest has certainly been amazing. There are so many up and coming, but this week's episode is Ebony Campbell. Takes so much away from it. I do really appreciate it. And don't forget to leave that follow, that subscribe, that like, and that comment. It really does help me. Thank you very much for listening. This is a top episode. Take care and hear from you soon. This is Coach Luca on the Reflective Coach Podcast.
Like, I want to have a specific style of play where we build out in the back, we force teams wide, we don't get beat up the middle, we capitalize on teams' mistakes, we're creative up, back, and through motions, creative runs on and off the ball. But I think I really just study other teams and just find the best way to beat them. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good, I'm glad. So it's quite early still in the morning for you where you're at?
Yes, yeah. I mean, well, it's 11 o'clock. It's not too early.
Yeah, that's good. It's well, you've got 5 hours on me still, which is something good, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we're able to work out a time that works for both of us.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's a nice time as well for both of us, which is good.
Yes, of course.
Do you have anything planned for the rest of your weekend after this then, or?
Me and my boyfriend are actually going on vacation today, but we're not leaving until later this afternoon. We're going to Myrtle Beach.
Oh yeah, nice. Is that far away, or?
It's not far. It's about an hour and a half. So we can't check in. We got an Airbnb, so we can't check in until 4. So.
And look at that.
And I'll be there until about Wednesday, and then just enjoying the summer before the season starts in August, because that gets crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just started planning my pre-season and was looking at the calendar the other night, and already where I'm off in summer because I work in a school, my pre-season's filling up pretty intensely, which then sort of takes away my holidays.
Right, yeah. So I think when I get back, I can start planning for the preseason as far as like what the schedule is going to look like, because we're finally done with finalizing our season schedule. Because being new, it's like, you know how it is, like when another coach promised a game and you're like, well, I didn't know that. You want to do your own thing, but then it's like coaches are like, well, with the last coach, so it's kind of all over the place, but that's settling down a bit. So now I can start planning ahead for our schedule for the preseason.
And that's good to hear in that sense that it's working out for you. So when it comes to now planning that preseason, obviously, as you said there, there's some kickback from the last coach and having to tie things up. But when you already like sort of preliminary started planning that, was it going to be a heavy preseason, a light preseason, a mid preseason in your own mind, or?
Maybe mid, I would say. So the program had low numbers the year prior to me. It went through some coaching turnover, so I'm the third coach in about 2 years. Looking for some stability. But the numbers are in a better spot than they were last year. We'll have 22. I have offers out there to get 2 more. But I think if we get up to about 24, 25, It'll be more of a mid to a little heavy, I would say, because I think the program will be in a better spot as far as having a little bit more depth in positions. So, the program was competitive in the past, but with the coaching turnover, they've dropped down a bit in the standings. So, fitness and changing the culture is really what I'm working on. So it's going to be different from them. It'll be a different preseason than what they had. The practice schedule will be a little bit different. I'm really big on injury preventative exercises and recovery. So I'm just trying to incorporate some structure into the program so we can get back to being top 5 in the conference like they once were 2 years ago.
And in terms of that coaching turnover then, does that play a factor in now your planning and your accountability as head coach in terms of, taking over and that turnover recently?
Yes, I think I wouldn't say the coaching turnover in the past was a bad thing. I think it was just more so of, opportunities. Like they felt the opportunity was going to be a long term, and then things didn't go as planned. I know for me, this was a perfect location for me in North Carolina to be. So my plan is to be here for the long term. But I think what kind of ties in is just, like I said, changing the culture because, once players start to trust the coach they have, and then the coach is leaving, then they're just like, all right, so now I'm the third coach. So how are they going to respond to me being that coach? Like they're going to be a little bit hesitant. I've only had one meeting with them because I came right before exam week and then they went home for the summer. So I think it's a matter of me just trying to get them to buy into what I would like to do with the program and really get them to trust me that I'm here for the long run. I'm here to develop and get the program back on the map. And that's going to take time. Like it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be trial and error when it comes to figuring out what does and what doesn't work for the team. But I think one thing I can say, everybody, including me and my grad assistant, we're coming in very optimistic into and with excitement. I don't think there's like, oh, here we go again with another coach. It's more so like, wow, this is the coach that we've been looking for based on, the interview process I went through. And we're expecting things to go up from here.
And that's a good thing then, because you're able to instill your expectations and what you'd like to go forward. And, as much as you got those challenges of having to get those players to build the trust and that changeover, it's also good because you're right, I want stability, I'm going to be here long term. This is what I'd like it to look short to long, and this is how I'm going to work with you. This is how the assistant coaches are going to implement this. And it's a good platform for you as a head coach, and especially that experience to build on top of what you're already going to do in the job and then what you're going to bring as well. So, it's a perfect portfolio to build in that sense for you in that position.
Say that question again. I'm sorry.
So yes, it was more of a statement than a question. It's good for you to build that portfolio and be in that position to sort of plan and build and move forward. And working with a squad of 25 players, it's quite similar to how my squad is looking for next year. So I work with youth, so we have a sort of 3-year gap. And we have some players who are from last year who remain, and we got about 14 of them. And we've got about 15 players coming up, so we've got something between 25 to 29 that we're expecting to sign on for next year. So that's a huge squad to sort of already look to manage for the course of the season, in terms of that rotation drop, the starting, how are we going to look, how's it going to look competitively, are we making the right decisions? And it's something which we sort of planned in last year, but there were quite a few of the older boys who were playing for the men's team, and they were more interested in playing for the men's team than the youth then at that point. So it ended up being nice for us because it slimmed down our squad naturally. But already this season, it's like, right, how do you manage 25 to 29 players, game time expectations and so on over the course of a season?
Right. And I think the main thing for me that kind of helped me is we do have 19 returners. So I'm not coming into a bad situation where it's like I had to scramble to find 10 plus players just to have a squad. I think what really helped me out is that we did have players that were going to return, 19 players. We have a huge rising senior class as well. So we are going into the next season with a lot of experience. I think 2024 is going to be really that rebuilding year, because we're gonna have to go after, transfers. We're gonna have to go after junior college and other like 4-year university transfers to get a little bit more experience with the ones leaving, and then build a younger class of freshmen as well. So I think 2024 is that year where I'm probably going to have to recruit a bigger class compared to the 2023 class. And also, like, the school has their expectations of the roster size as well. They do want 30 girls on the roster on a yearly basis. And I think they know that me coming in, it's not going to happen right away. It's going to take time to build that roster. But honestly, I think at this level in the conference that we're playing in, 30 is an ideal number. You need depth. And, the pandemic has changed the game for a lot of women athletes when it comes to injuries. You would think that, a year off from soccer, or a year of not being competitive, a year or two, however, wherever they were in the States, you would think that it may not have a big impact, but it's resulted in a lot of ACL injuries and things of that nature. So, back a couple of years ago, if they would have said 30, you would have been like, nah, 30 is too much. I don't need 30. But now it's pretty common to have 30 on your roster, because you just never know. You can take every precaution, every measure in the world to make sure they stay healthy, but there's always going to be one or two that just have this injury that comes, like, that just is unexpected.
Of course, and that factors in between their men's football and women's football then in that sense, because you might go in and go, right, in a men's team I'm going to slim down to 25 because we have the measures in place, but I know it's not always the best scenario. But for women, where that ACL is becoming a bigger issue and a bigger situation to sort of look into and try and find those measures to try and protect them and understanding why it's happening and etc. So you're sort of then planning in women's football to have that bigger squad, because there's the support for the players, rather than going, we're looking at it from a competitive point of view. We need that depth in there just to cover injury and to support one another then in that sense.
Right. And I think it also creates an environment where you can develop them as well. So even though, like, you always have your players and you know what the rankings are, who's like your best 18 and who's kind of below the 18. But I think also it gives you time, like, when you're like, yes, it's a big roster to manage, but you can also take some time to develop them. So if something does happen, you can put your trust in that player to come in and step up. I think what's unique about the NAIA level is that a lot of young players, and even D3, NCAA D3 that I've coached prior to this, I think what's unique about these small universities is that you have young players that can come in and make an impact right away. Whereas the D2, D1 levels, you only see a couple of those younger players on the field that their first year there. But the smaller universities, you're able to see younger players get the playing time. So I think it's a good opportunity to develop players. So when they're going into their sophomore and junior year, they can end up stepping up, and then you're just kind of replenishing in the depth for positions that you need. So I think it has some benefits, even though you're planning ahead for possible injuries. You never know, who you could find that can be that depth coming off of the bench. I mean, I've had a leading goal scorer at previous institutions that, wasn't even a starter for us. She was coming off the bench and she was the leading goal scorer on the team. So you find girls like that, and it keeps the environment competitive. And also those starters, like, they know, like, I can't get comfortable. Somebody can step in at any minute. It's not even about injuries sometimes. It's just about the player in that starting position not getting too comfortable, because they know they have competition for their spot on the field. And that's on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I understand that completely, because where we're having this sort of amalgamation of two squads again this year, you've got players who have played for me last year and they've already held down starting positions, and they might think, I've got that year experience on the boys coming up, and I've had the starting position and all this. But realistically, if there's players coming up and they've got more technical quality, or they might be fitter, or they might offer me something more, it doesn't naturally, give the players that I had last year that position guaranteed, or that guaranteed, expectation that they're going to have, the role to play ahead of the younger players. And it's like, right, we got competition coming up now, and it's going to be good and it's going to be healthy, and you might be the older boys, but they might push you out of your positions, and it's up to you to go, right, yeah, I have that experience and I want to get back in the first team. I'm going to push them harder than they're pushing me. So I am looking forward to it in that sense, and it's going to be good to build the two squads together, and it's going to be exciting, and that's similar for you and your team, which is good.
Right. I think, I know some levels have those, that first team and then that development team. I know our men's team has that. I don't know, where we'll stand in the next few years going into probably, let's look 2 years ahead, about 2025. But I know when I was at an NCAA D2 institution, the development team in 2019 was becoming a little bit more popular. So it's like when you did have those bigger rosters, you were able to set up games, and they were still competitive games for those players to play and develop. But I do agree with you when it comes to it doesn't matter what you did last year. When it comes to recruiting and when it comes to the returners, I tell the recruits that the prospects, the student athletes, I tell them, I'm not I think you are a great player, and I believe that you'll make an impact on the team, coming into this program, but I'm not promising you a starting spot, and I'm not promising you playing time, because what you did in club, when you come to preseason, what you did in club is not going to matter. And I tell my returners that too. When you come back next year, what you did the year prior it doesn't matter. Like, you could have been the starter, and next year you come in whatever, especially when it comes to formation, you kind of adjust to your team to see what formation you think is best. And you could have been, the number one attacking midfielder in a 4-4-2, but okay, we want to switch to a 4-2-3-1. And now all of a sudden you're second on the depth chart or third on the depth chart because it may be a little stronger. So that's why I always kind of lay out the expectations prior to the summer when it comes to the fitness packet and things that they get. So they know, you can kind of put it back on them, and you can say, well, these were my expectations with you coming in. This was just the baseline, and you didn't do that. And always just communicating with their players to know where they stand, so they know exactly what they need to do to be that number one player in that position.
Absolutely, and that's something that's already filtered in the back of my mind, is how we're going to have induction this year and how that's going to look, and what the expectation is going to be, how I'm going to support them, how we're going to look at the team, what the expectations for the players are from myself as well, and trying to make sure that that's communicated before they have that set off. And if they decide by December that they've had 3 months of youth football and it's not for them, or they want to go find another team, or they're not willing to try and push to break through a bigger squad and they want to be in a smaller squad, then maybe that's something that might work out for them. And you can't control those factors, but it's just doing as much as we can and what our expectations are, and then balancing it on the team and giving the players as much support. And then if they want to go off and find those decisions, then that's on them and what they go on. But in terms of that recruitment now, obviously you work for an institute, and the expectations might be right across the soccer program, and the standards. So it might be for the men's, the youth, the women's, etc. And it might be, the same category across. But when it comes down to that recruitment, do the institute go, all right, we want these players to be fitting in X, Y, and Z categories because this is how we'd like our players to look? Or is that more free fall on you and how your team and philosophy looks in terms of that setup?
The school institution just gives me a number. We are enrollment driven. I think a lot of small private liberal arts schools are enrollment driven. I think that they don't necessarily give me this student needs to have X, Y, Z. It falls more on me. However, I think, if you kind of read between the lines a little bit, every institution has their expectations of, as far as what they want to do, when it comes to how they get accepted into the school. So of course I know I got to look for a player that meets the academic requirements, of course, to get accepted into school. But then it's I would go off of whatever standards I, choose for the program. So, I want to look for a player who's coachable. How do they respond to their coaches? How do they respond to their teammates? How do they react when they make a mistake on the field? Things of that nature. When they make, not only when they make a mistake on the field, but when their teammates make a mistake on the field as well. Does one mistake they make turn into 3, 4, 5 mistakes, or are they learning from that mistake and improving and progressing and getting better? And also when their teammates make a mistake that they may not agree with, are they yelling at their teammates? how are they responding verbally to that? And body language, are they encouraging? Can they be a leader on the field with their actions? Also, I look at how they interact with their parents as well. I mean, I like to get to know the families, especially on the visit, to see like the background that they come from. A lot of parents are very honest when it comes to their children. Like, this is what we expect from her, and things like that. So it's nice to get to know the parents and see, like, you can get a little bit of an idea of how they're raising their child as far as, when it comes to adversity and things like that. But yeah, and then also just fitting into the team culture of, just the type of human being they are, what type of person they are, like really getting to know them. I don't like to just bring someone, like, if I'm interested in an athlete, I do want to get them on campus so they can visit. But I'm having phone conversations with them first, before I'm inviting them to campus. And then once I invite them to campus, I get to know them a little better. I tell them what the process is. And then if I feel like we feel as a coaching staff they're a good fit, then we put that offer out there for them. So we don't drag the process out as far as recruiting, but we also don't try to go as quickly as possible. So I think, my job, outside of soccer is to make sure that they're prepared for the real world. Like, I'm not just teaching them the tactics and the technical skill it takes to play the game. I'm teaching them how to be decent human beings. I want them to be their best selves on and off the field. So I make sure that the person that I'm bringing in is going to add a positive light to what we already have. And just coming into a new team, I'm still getting a feel of the players I already have and what I would like to do moving forward with our culture, so I can make sure the girls I'm bringing in are going to add to that. Lastly, just a good student, academically, academics are huge. If you are just going through the motions off the field in the classroom, like, you're just going to go through the motions on the field. I remember a team that I had in Texas. The GPA, when I got there, the GPA was very low. It was under a 3.0. It was like a 2.5 or a 2.6 or something of that nature. And before I left, I recruited 2 recruiting classes before I ended up departing that school. And those 2 classes alone helped bring the overall team GPA to a 3.2. So you got to look for that too. Players that are gonna give their all on and off the field. Like, you can be the best player, but you got to stay eligible to play. So if you're just going through the motions with your grades, you can expect to find a balance between both. So those are the type of things I look for when it comes to recruiting a player into the program.
That's definitely interesting in terms of a recruitment clip itself, and it's very personality heavy based in terms of that recruitment selection, which is good because it's a team which you need to develop those dynamics and that expectation and the cultures and how that looks academically for you, because there's expectations from the institute, etc. So it's really good to combine that and then drive in that. But it also then creates that buy-in for players, because as you might be doing that recruitment process. For you, it's great because you say you go to a showcase event and there's 1,000 players to choose from. For you could go, do you know what? I actually don't need X, Y, and Z because I've got A, B, and C over here, which they might not be the most technical, but personality-wise, we can mold them and get them up to those standards and create that and how that works academically. But it's also good because then those players, when they are there at that showcase, if they're not willing to work under Ebony because they don't want to go through that personality or be challenged or pushed or try and fit in a culture because they're like, oh, I just want to get my academics and I want to develop technically because it's going to be about this and I'm not bothered about that, then it's sort of, you're weeding out the players who are right for you, which is the right fit. And that's what it's all about, because you might get 2 players in and suddenly your culture completely changes and the players get upset and relationships break down, and it might impact on those who are doing academically because they're being affected off the pitch by it, etc. Then it can have that that domino effect realistically. So I think it's great that you're in that position to have that recruitment selection. I know you're sort of new into that head coach role and you're saying long term. But say 2-3 years from now, a bigger institute comes in and offers you a head coach role. They've doubled the resources, doubled the wage maybe. They've given you a nice package, but they've said, right, this is our recruitment selection, and this is absolute. You have no input on it. This is how it looks. Would that impact you making a decision about going in, or is it about maybe focusing on a philosophy then for yourself?
I think if that happened, I think I would just kind of have to take into consideration that recruitment class that I'm coming into, like it may not be ideal to what I will recruit. I think the first year is always about, at any head coach job, it's always about adjusting until you can get what you want in there. I don't think that would have a significant impact on like declining an offer of that sort, especially if it's going to benefit my career. I think I would just have to really just take the time to assess and evaluate where those players are, the talent level of the team, the level of competition, to be able to say like, okay, I, would need to adjust in this way going in to compete. But also just try to negotiate a little bit, all right, this is the recruitment class. Is there money out there budget-wise to try to get maybe 2 more players that are a little bit more impactful? But even if that couldn't happen, I think I would just go and adjust and just see like, what can I do with the squad I have now? And then, plan ahead for the year, like the next year moving forward. Okay, this is what we need based on how we did, based on the results and the statistics of that year.
No, it's just an interesting thought that I had then in terms of how could that look long term, and say recruitment or the organisation had an impact on your decision making. But I think that's a fantastic response in saying, we could negotiate this and how this might look, and then going in and making that change, which is really interesting in that sense. So you're a head coach now. Some people don't want to be head coaches. So for you, was it always within you going, I am a head coach within me, or was it sort of, I'm an assistant coach and I'm going to see how a head coach works out? Was it innate, or is it just sort of a step in to see what happens?
Well, I've actually been a head coach before this. So I was a head coach. I got a head coach job at a D3 school in Texas in 2020, and I ended up departing that school in 2022. And my goal was I liked coaching at the school I was at as a head coach. But I think just where I wanted to be with my career, I wanted to step back into D2. And recruiting at D3 is a bit different because you can't give the scholarships. So building a team is a little bit is a lot more challenging, and you have to target certain athletes. But also from a family standpoint, coming back, the location that I chose to step back towards was a bit closer to home as well. I was in that head coaching role, went back to an assistant role, and then actually how it kind of worked out, my goal was to stay in the assistant role a little longer, build my resume at D2 because I had been at a D2 assistant job prior to that D3 head job. And I was like, I want to build my career D2. I played D2. I feel like I have a lot to give back to the level. And then, the head coach that hired me, he ended up leaving after a year, and the goal was maybe I can get the promotion and be elevated to a head coach there. It didn't work out that way. And the head coach that was hired actually wanted to bring in his own staff. So, the agreement was after my contract is up, I had to look for another job. So I think I was looking for head coaching jobs. Like I said, if I do end up having to leave, if after my contract's up, I think my thought process was more so I would just go back to a head coaching job because, when you're fluctuating from assistant to assistant jobs, the salary, and it's not just about the money, but, you got to pay bills. Yeah. But it was more so I knew that I wasn't really going to get a higher salary just going to another assistant role, especially not wanting to move out of state because I had just moved from Texas to North Carolina. I think it just, the way it worked out was just a blessing because this job that I got came open in North Carolina, and it was only an hour and 45 minutes from where I already was. So I think it was just kind of easy for me to say, let me step back into the head coach role. So I think I've always wanted to be a head coach. But I think this was more of this is how it kind of worked out from the other job. But I'm glad that it worked out because this ended up being probably the best place for me. But yeah, I think my overall goal is I do want to essentially elevate to a D2 head coach. And I think that would probably be what I would want to do whenever I decide to move on from this job. Because I've coached NCAA D2, NCAA D3, and then now I'm coaching NAIA. And really, I'm just trying to build my head coaching resume. So when a D2 job does come about, I'll have built that resume, built a successful program, and then move up from there. So that's kind of where my thought process is when it comes to the head coaching role at the college level.
It's just, finding that innate wanting to be a head coach and be in that position, because I've always known that I'm a lead coach, a head coach, a manager, and I know that's where I want to be. And unless an opportunity comes up where I know if I move into an assistant coach with the right manager and the right team and setup, then I'm going to really learn to go, how we plan pre-season, periodization, how to manage games, and learn all of that, which maybe I haven't experienced so much as maybe a head coach or other areas which I've missed out on. So for me, it's, I'd only be willing to move into the assistant coach role if it's going to benefit me and be in there. But realistically, I know it's always within me to be the head coach, to be the lead, and I think I would struggle unless I was really, ready to hand over the reins and go, do you know what, I'm going to be an assistant coach at this level, to not be a head coach or lead, because it's difficult when it's within you and you want to lead and you've got planning and you're thinking about your squad and how you might want to do things. But if you're in a position where you are that assistant coach or you're just a coach, etc., but you are ready to be the head coach, it can be quite hard in terms of that motivation to manage personally then for ourselves as coaches.
Right. I think I had a lot of I was blessed to have a lot of experience in the assistant coach role. So, prior to me getting my first head coach role, and I learned a lot from a lot of great coaches that I was very thankful to be mentored by. So moving into that head coach role, I did feel ready. Like I said, I decided to going back to an assistant role was by choice, but I can say that was very difficult for me because I was working, when I went back to my assistant coach role at the D2 level, I was working under a coach that was his first head coach position. So it was very, there were some things that, of course, you're not going to agree with everything that the head coach does, but there were some things that were very difficult for me to encounter and deal with because I knew that certain decisions that were made were going to result in other things because of my experience as that head coach for those 2 years that I did have it. So it's I think me having a little bit more experience than the coach that I was working under, it was kind of hard to collaborate because sometimes I feel like when you get that first head coach job, your ego is kind of up there and, you want to prove a point. And when I went back to that assistant role, I really wish I could have collaborated a little bit more to prevent some of the things that happened in, their first year of that head coaching role, because, coming from that head coaching position, I knew how things would play out. So I definitely understand what you mean when it comes to the, when you're ready to step into that head coach role, how it can be when you're the assistant role. And I think it was easier when I was learning, but then after I had been there and went down to the assistant role again, I think that was very challenging for me.
And I think it's, also on the flip side of that, now you're a head coach and say you've got an assistant coach who's very motivated to have things and be in that position. It's great that they're challenging, it's great that they can be supportive, but they can overstep the mark at times. And it's about then, right, I've got to manage you and remember that you are an assistant coach until you step up and support and nurture them, because you don't want them to go away and become a rival coach like on Ted Lasso, for example. But it's when they are that, motivated to go, oh, right, I'm going to do this and this should be that way, sometimes they can overstep that mark and it goes from challenging and supportive to detrimental and tough to sort of deal with. So, it's then managing that those people. So I've got a couple of coaches coming up this year, and one was the head coach of the under-16s last year. So now he's moving into the assistant coach role. So it was similar to last year. The other coach came up, but he was more than happy to go into the assistant role, and he is the perfect assistant. So now this year I'm already a bit apprehensive about what the expectations are. How do they want training to look? Are they going to question, the tactics of team, the shape, because that's the way they played with them? So it's just that's going to fold out over the course of the season, and it's something which I'm going to learn to manage with, and what their expectations are, and how they expect me to run, and how I expect them. So it's definitely interesting when we are in that manager or head coach position, just for staffing and then the expectations across player staffing, that philosophy. So now you've got the team is building long term. What is the philosophy looking like for you? Is it going to be like a high performance? Is it going to be more of a nurturing player support development? How does that overall look for you, say, long term?
I think going into this season, it's going to be about the individual development for the team. The main thing is I want to get this team back to being a playoff team. And so there are going to be a lot of things that we need to work on going into this season. Of course, I want to win every game, but with the development and the tactics I want to bring to them and the style of play I want to present to them, it's going to take time. So it's not going to look perfect every game, and we are probably going to be sacrificing some games and not get the W's, not really see all the W's that we would like to see. But I'm really focused on long-term success, so I don't believe in doing a quick fix that's going to give you temporary victories. I want it to be sustainable and long-term. So I think this year is really going to be focused on the development of the team individually, as a whole, and the style of play we want to establish. And like I said, the team needs stability. They need continuity. So it's going to be challenging the first year because they're going to have to trust me, and they're going to have to buy in. Of course, they're going to win. They're going to want to win just as much as I do, but I think it's a matter of getting them to just trust the process. If we can be organized defensively as a team, if we can be creative in the final third, if we can play out of the back consistently, and things of that nature, we will get the wins. But it's not gonna happen during the preseason scrimmages perfectly. It's not gonna happen, when it goes into the first non-conference games. It may not happen until October. So I think one of the main things is just focusing on the development of the team and establishing a style of play. So then when we get those returners that come, that return going into 2024, and we get that new class coming in, it'll be pretty much instilled in their minds. I want to incorporate film into our program. I don't think they have really been presented with a lot of film sessions. So I don't think they were able to visually see what they needed to work on a weekly basis. And that's where I mean the structure of the program as well. We need to be having film sessions. You can only do so much on the field with them. It's not until they see it, they see themselves, when they finally start to click and understand how we need to look versus what they're doing. So, going into this season, of course, I want that winning record, but I'm willing to sacrifice wins for the development of the team to get better, because the success will come. But it can't be there's no quick fix. You have to do it the right way, so the team and the coaching staff can reap the benefits in the long run.
And I think that's good what you say about understanding that it's going to take time, and it's going to, have the adjustments, and it's going to take, the building blocks to put in place, because, sometimes you are a head coach, you're like, I want to go in, I want to do this, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z, and we have to implement this quickly. But realizing that it's going to be, a longer term thing, and you're going to take time to implement it, that sort of takes pressure off yourself in terms of those expectations, because sometimes I put those expectations on myself. Like, I want this to happen, I want to do it quickly, I want to implement this. best, but realistically, it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes just slowing down, even though it goes against, some innate personality traits, it's going to work out for the best sometimes, because it's going to let you just crack on with your role. And sometimes it's like, do you know what, let's actually focus on player development, and then we can look at style of play in depth next year, for example, and try to really instill that for then a long-term expectation. So by, say, year 5, then players coming in going, all right, Ebony plays this way, and this is how we fit in, and then the recruitment might change, and then the culture's built, etc. But I know you touched on, defensive at the back, creative in the final third, playing out from the back. But how would you describe your style of play? Are you attacking? Are you counter-offensive? Are you reactive? Are you balanced? Are you possession-heavy? How does your style of play look for you?
I would like to be a bit balanced. Of course, I think every coach wants to be possession-heavy. I would love to have the ball 70% of the time in a game, but I think when at any level, I think you just have to do what it takes to win. And on a weekly basis, you may be playing one team that's very, very direct, and we're like, all right, since this team is very direct, all we need to do is win the ball in the air and possess around them. But then you might play another team that's very possession heavy. They may play a high line, and you can ping it over the top and play a little bit more direct against them. So I like to, I want to have a specific style of play where we build out of the back. We force teams wide. We don't get beat up the middle. We capitalize on teams' mistakes. We're creative up, back, and through motions, creative runs on and off the ball. But I think I really just study other teams and just find the best way to beat them. So, whatever practice we have on a weekly basis, those practices leading up to that match day are going to be what we need to do. So if a team is playing a 4-4-3-3 and we're playing a 4-2-3-1, and we know that we can expose them wide because they don't have a lot of width in their formation, we need to attack up the gaps on the flanks and get crosses off and, drag them out wide so we have that space to beat them in the middle. So I think it's more of we have our formation that we play, and teams will know that we would want to build out of the back. But I think it's going to be a mixture of keeping possession some games, and then and then playing a little bit more direct other games. I usually choose 2 formations that our team would fluctuate between depending on the team we're playing. If a team's a little bit more stronger in the attack, a bit more balanced, defensively organized, we'll just try to stack the midfield, play a mid-block, sit back on them a little bit, and just capitalize on their mistakes. And just stay defensively organized. But if I feel like we're a little bit stronger in the attack for a team, okay, let's add a forward up there and let's play, let's play with 2 forwards, play a 4-4-2 or some sort. So I think it just depends on the team we're playing, but I do want to be defensively organized, play out of the back, and just create dangerous opportunities when it comes to playing teams. That's what I want our team to look like. So when the scouting report goes out for our team, people know, well, this is what they do. They're very creative with their runs, and things of that nature. So I just want to keep it consistent across the board. We're not changing our style of play for teams, but we're changing the areas that we attack and the areas that we defend when it comes to playing certain teams, depending on how strong or weak they are.
And, you sort of touched on it earlier, your principles are sort of interchanging to fit the players, for example, in that sense, and, being adaptable to set up for the teams to get that result. So, it's good because, some coaches are quite a stickler for, right, I am a 4-2-3-1, and that's how it's going to look for the next 20 games, and this is the exact shape, and we're going to have players which are going to slot in, and even if we get injuries, we're going to still have players who might have to move positions because I want to stay with this formation, and this is how we're going to play, rather than realistically going, right, you know what, we might actually have to change after 8 games because it's not working, and we might have to then go to a 4-3-3 or 3-5-2, etc. But some coaches really stick to their certain, style and principles, and they're not willing to adapt in that sense, and they're not willing to sacrifice on their principles because of that, because they're quite stubborn and they're fixed to them. So it's good to hear that you're adjustable to them, and it's a good learning process for you, because the next 5 years you might play two different formations that you're not playing now, because over that period of time the players have changed, the technical aspects have, the game has changed in itself. So it's a good way of finding your philosophy, but how that philosophy may look over a period of time will then maybe impact that style of play, or the philosophy might be fixed but then the style of play might be interchangeable. So it's quite interesting in that sense. But for long-term view, is it going to be a more competitive head and going, all right, I want results, and I know you want results, but going, do you know what, I'm going to be a results-based manager or head coach, or being known for being a player development coach with results?
Player development with results. I do believe you can win games, and it can be like results driven, but like, is it worth winning games if nobody's learning or nobody's developing? And I've worked under a coach that was more worried about the wins instead of the development of the players. And I saw how it affected the players. Yeah, the players wanted to win, but really what they cared about, am I getting better? Am I developing? So you'll be surprised that some of the most competitive players, and this was a winning program that me and the head coach inherited. They were winning for the past 4 years, but they felt like this was the first season that they were winning but not getting better. They were winning because they were more athletic. They were winning because they were more technical. But when push comes to shove, then when we played those better teams that were just as athletic and just as technical as we were, and tactically organized, they realized, like, dang, we're not as good as we thought. So I think it's results driven with development, because yeah, we can win, but we can win a game 1-0, and there can still be something that we needed to improve on. Or we can win a game 4 or 5-0. There's something that we needed to improve on. Like, yeah, guys, we won, but there were some things that were very concerning. And you put away 5 goals maybe because you were the better team. But imagine if this was a team that was a little bit more evenly matched and you made those same mistakes. Those could possibly cost you the game. So yeah, I want to win, but I also want players to develop. They can't stay stagnant, because when say we start winning, and then say if we make a national tournament and none of my players have developed, they're not going to be prepared for it. So if you want those sustainable results that continue, the players have to develop with where the program is going, or where you would like to take the program, because if they're just staying stagnant, you're only going to have temporary success. So it's more about the long term.
And that's good to hear, and it's it's about that long term, which is going to be good for both the players and yourself. And I know you said about expectations, but when it comes to a season starting, do you set objectives? I know expectations might be different here, but do you set objectives for your season, or do you just allow the season to fold out for yourself?
So I think when it comes to the players, and when we meet for that first team meeting before practices start, we do have objectives. We have like the standards and the expectations of the team. We go over, all right, these are the formations that we're going to be working on. And then we go over like what our objectives or goals are. So I know one goal specifically going into this next season is we want to make the playoffs. You have to be realistic as well. And because I really use that first preseason practice to evaluate fitness and the overall player. Because like I said, I've only seen film. I haven't been able to see them play live. I go over like what our expectations are, what our objectives are for this season, and then we just put action to it after. So whether it's core values, so we say, all right, we have these core values, and this is what we want to do forward. So I lay it all out there that first day. And of course it's talked over as a coaching staff before we even present this to the team. But I lay it all out the first day. So going into that player meeting, they know exactly what that looks like. I feel I'm a very organized coach, so I don't like to just go into things blindly, and I don't want players to ever question like, well, she never said this, or I don't have clarity on this. So I lay it all out and then open the floor for questions. Because I know sometimes it could be a lot of information to throw on them at once. So I open the floor for questions for clarity. And then as we progress through the season, that's something that you can kind of rely on. The players can rely on because they'll have a copy of it, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation or just a Word document. They'll have access to it. So they can refer back to it. But also, when you're going over that, then you can refer to that meeting and be like, remember, we went over this at this meeting. These were my expectations of the team, and this is what we've been working towards. So that's something for them to refer to. So I like to lay it out. Soccer players are very visual, so they like to see how things are going to look, so they have some comfort going into it.
Of course, and when it comes down to those objectives, say you set 3 just from, say, a coaching personnel, and you're going, right, we're going to make playoffs, we're going to have X amount of wins, and we're going to keep, say, X amount of clean sheets, for example. Do you then go in and say, right, players, do you want to set an objective as a player-based, and then have, say, one player-based objective, or is it just, these are the coaching personnel agreement objectives, and this is how we're going to have them for the season?
I think that players should have a say because it's their program too. So I think there are those coaching objectives, like the tactics, what you want to accomplish tactically and technically and all of that. I think those are needed. But when it comes to the players, letting them have say in something. So we say if we had 3 coaching goals that we want to, a goal for the coaching staff and the team we want to achieve, and then you open the floor of what are some player objectives that you have, like some player goals. What would y'all like to accomplish as a team this year as well? And then we can kind of see all right, this is what our layout looks like. When it comes to the core values, as a coaching staff, we'll have the 2 or 3 core values we want to incorporate, and then we might let them choose 2. So I think you should let them have some say in some things, but also the coaches should have a lot of say in it as well. Because it's both of our programs, so we need to be able to collaborate. So you're not letting them have too much freedom. You're kind of setting that boundary, like you guys do have a say, but there are things that are non-negotiable. So that way they know, we chose these as well. This was a collaborative effort between the coaching staff and the players. So it's a mixture. Basically meeting each other halfway. This is what we want to do as a coaching staff. What do you guys want to do as players? We'll put them together, and this is how the layout will look.
And what are your non-negotiables then?
I think the non-negotiables usually are kind of like the team rules. So you're being on time, you're communicating, you're holding each other accountable. I always have, like I said, it varies from each team, but I know those 3 are big for me. Accountability, being on time. But I think I kind of base it off of the environment and the team and things of that nature. I like to treat them like adults. So I don't have a heavy list of team rules. I just have expectations. This is the standard I want you at. And if you're not living up to that standard, then you can't really expect the coaching staff to feed into what you're not doing. So it's really my non-negotiables are pretty much the common sense and the basic things that they should already know. But at the college level, you think they know it, and then they have no clue.
And you can create that culture, that environment with those standards and those expectations, and naturally those rules as such will then play out rather than going in and going, these are the rules, this is how it's going to be, and this is how it's going to look. Because sometimes that can be really detrimental, especially when working with adults or older age group players who would be like, what? You're talking to us like we're under 7s, for example. Whereas realistically, by just creating that naturally, they're going to understand rather than it being dictated to or said to them in that sense. And it can just create that understanding and that environment, which is more beneficial than going in and saying it.
Right. And I think when you have, I've had a team where I've worked under coaches that prefer a lot of rules, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but also I think that the mistake made there is you have all of these rules that are written for these players. They're going to find ways to get around them because they feel well, geez, we have all these rules. Do they not trust us? If you want to treat them like adults, you just set the standard and then you plan accordingly for whatever those like you hold them accountable. So they know if you don't meet this standard, like I know it's one of the non-negotiables for me is one of our core values will be accountability. That's big for me. So they have to know that if they aren't living up to those standards, they're going to be held accountable for that. So common sense would tell them there are going to be consequences if I'm not living up to these standards. I don't think you need to make so many rules, and then it feels like it feels like if they make a mistake, they're wrong. No, I think it's just a matter of setting the standard and treating them like adults and just letting them know you're going to be held accountable and asking them if you're allowed to hold them accountable. I think like one thing when asking, like, if our core value is accountability, am I allowed as a coach to hold you accountable? And if they all say yes, when I start holding them accountable, I'll say, well, on this day I asked you if I could hold you accountable and you said yes. And that's what I'm doing right now. So then that way, if you give them a consequence for something, they're not caught off guard because they know, well, I did something wrong and I'm going to be held accountable for it, whatever the punishment may be, whatever that consequence may be. So I think that's the main thing, just making sure that they know across the board so they're not caught off guard. Like they're not caught off guard when you have to be the bad guy. Because, being the bad guy isn't fun. So when you have to be the bad guy and they don't like your choice, at least they know, like, okay, I knew this was going to come. They don't think that you're just dropping something out of thin air. They know that this was the consequence. It's clear and concise and straight to the point.
Of course, and when it comes down to, say, that head coach role then, do you tend to allow your assistant coaches to lead on the grass and then you take more of a strategic and then look at that culture, that environment, the standards, how you manage the players, how you support them, or are you more on the grass and hands-on yourself with your, support staff?
I think there are some things that I'm a little bit more hands-on about, and then the support staff, like when it comes to all the tactical things, I think I'm a lot more hands-on with them when it comes to stopping making those coaching points. But I think in certain things such as small-sided drills or technical drills, that's where I want my support staff to kind of step up, because I don't feel like I need to be micromanaging our warm-up drills or our small-sided and things like that. But I think I just kind of set that boundary with my support staff. Okay, when we're doing small-sided and we're doing, technical drills, you guys can be a little bit more hands-on. But when it comes to the tactical side of it, that's when I can be a little bit more hands-on on that. So that way the players kind of know who steps in where and there's no confusion.
That sounds good. And now that you come into your first, say, pre-season, training session, how are you planning that? Are you going to go for, say, lots of small-sided games to just get them integrated and evaluate? Are you setting up like you would a typical session, say, mid-season? How is your first session looking for you?
The first session of preseason?
Yeah.
So first session of preseason, we'll do a fitness test. All the fitness tests, we do 3. We usually do a beep test, a speed and agility test, and then like a short sprint test, like 60s or something of that nature. And so we'll do the beep test the first day in the morning, and then we'll do some type of recovery for their legs. I don't like the morning sessions to be super long. So morning sessions are like an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. But then when we do the afternoon evening session, that'll be more, I'm going to use that first day to do 77 or 66, depending on our numbers, because I need to see them play individually. Like I said, I've never seen any of them play live. So I want to see how they are in a game, like in a game situation. So we'll do a 77, probably split them up into 3 teams, have them play each other. And we'll use that. Like, of course, we'll start off with a warm up, like activation, a warm up, something technical, and then hop right into 77. And then I'll take notes of that. And then going into the week, we'll finish out whatever fitness tests we need to do. And I think we're going to have that first week is going to be a lot of small sided. And then that second week, we'll start hopping more into the tactics, because I want to see how they are in 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v2s, things of that nature to challenge their technical ability. And then we can move more on the tactical side and start going into preparing for our scrimmages and what we need to do. Sometimes midday, every other day, I'll plan a tactical session. I don't want to throw too much information on them at once. So we'll start off with the first tactical session. Probably not the first day, but the second day. And so it'll be probably twice a week, maybe, or 3 times a week. And then we can get those tactical sessions across. So when we start working on the tactics, they've already had a visual of it, and then we'll just start implementing it on the field. But also, this is going to be a learning experience for me because of course, based on what I know I have a formation in my head that I want to do that I think will be the strongest in, but I really won't know until it all unfolds on the field.
And when it comes down to, say, that tactical session then, and you're looking at implementing a style of play and then looking at shape, do you tend to do a lot of walkthroughs and then off-the-ball work in terms of shape? Or is it a lot of ball rolling time and then go in, adjust, correct, and then look at shape and how it is then? How does sort of implementing shape and style and tactics look for you, or how you set up?
So I think if we're working on something like a specific topic, like say if we're doing building out of the back, I would explain to them how I would want it to look, and kind of give them, different options of how I want that to look, and then give coaching points, kind of a walkthrough first, and then I'll give them the freedom to play, and then whenever I see fit, then I'd hop in and do a coaching point of that nature. So I kind of explain it to them, walk them through it, then let them play and give them the freedom, because I don't want them to ever think that there are some options that they might make building out of the back that do benefit us and do, because, as a coach, I don't just see things one way, but I may have a vision of how I wanted it to look. And then there's something that they did that actually was really good. So I give them that freedom first, and then I make the coaching point. So they're feeling comfortable, okay, I'm just giving them the tools and then giving them the freedom to implement those tools, instead of them feeling like, well, if I don't do it the way she says, then I made the mistake and I'm wrong. So I always want to give them the freedom to be creative when it comes to these topics. But I'm always going to tell them, I'm giving you the tools, I'm laying it out. But you will have that freedom to do as you please in the game, as long as it benefits the team and it's not costing us goals.
So a more of a guided discovery learning approach then, would you say?
Yes.
And when it comes to, say, delivering, say 50 sessions over a season, do they tend to mostly be the same? So traditional, in terms of a warm-up, a technical, and SSG, or are they whole part whole, or are they more guided discovery learning, or is there a sort of a balance of, say, 33% each towards of those, or you do like 50% of one more than that, or is it mostly traditional session delivery and planning for you?
More traditional. I think our warm-up and our activation will always be about 30 minutes. Like I said, I'm very injury preventative, so the warm-up needs to be very thorough. So that will always be the same. The structure of our sessions will pretty much stay the same, but what we do may change from session to session depending, because we play 2 games a week. We play a midweek game and we play a weekend game. So we have to keep in mind that not every session is going to look the same. One session might be, we always have a recovery session after game day. So we're not doing anything tactical after game day. We're probably just playing soccer, tennis, and we're playing fun games that just gets their legs moving. So you have to take into consideration, okay, when's the last time we played? When's the last time we were in the gym lifting, and doing injury preventative weights? So I think I just take into consideration the load that they had the day prior. And also your players, you may not think they should be showing up to a practice fatigue, but they may be a little fatigued and you see that. So you have to take a little off. So I think it's always structured on what we want to do, but we have to be flexible in when it comes to eyeing how the girls look and things of that nature, and also when we played and what the load of the session is going to look like.
And some coaches, say they got 30 games. Over that 30 games, 95% of the time, that starting 11 will look the same for that 95%. But for you, when it comes to, injury prevention and managing loads and supporting players, are you sort of factoring that into your game selection across the season then and going, all right, Josie's played for 5 games, we need to stop playing her even though she's one of our better players because we need to take some pressure off her injury? Or do you tend to sort of go, right, we need to look at our best team and then build around that? Or is it going, right, we need to look at loads and periodization and that, balance?
Well, we definitely don't have 30 games. I'm thankful for that. But we have about 17 games a season, and that's including, 18 games, and that's including scrimmages, like the preseason scrimmages. So I like to play the best 11, but I am mindful of what we have moving forward. Our depth isn't where I would like it this season, so I do want to focus on playing the best 11, but I'm also going to be mindful of who needs a break. I don't believe in players playing 90-minute games. Now, there are some positions that need to play 90 minutes. Your center backs probably need to play 90 minutes. Your holding mid, maybe, and your goalkeeper. And like I said, those selected midfielders. But there are people like I need to see where our depth is first, and then kind of determine, okay, what is it going to look like when it comes to season? Because we may play the top team in the conference, and I'm just going with those best 15, 16 maybe players that are going to play. And then we play a little bit of weaker team, and okay, I can use some of the people I didn't use to give those players a break. But it also depends on if players perform. So I always tell players, and I know some players sometimes don't understand me when I say this, but you coming off to the field is a reward. Because, when it comes to girls that may not get a lot of playing time, there are some games where it's perfect for them to showcase what they can do. And so if the starting 11 isn't getting the job done, it's kind of hard to take those players off the field and then put in players that may not be it's hard to explain. Like, those players may not be best for that game. And so I want, hey, go in and do your job so I can reward other players. But sometimes I've seen it on the other end of the spectrum where that starting 11 isn't doing very well. And you're just like, all right, I'm just going to take all you guys out and put on that second string per se, and they end up doing a lot better. But also I like to get my players in that don't get a lot of playing time in those games that are a little bit less competition, because I want them to have film. So when it comes to, if they come to me and say, why am I not playing? That's maybe a game that I can show them. Or, that's a game where I can show them where you played very well and it's looking promising for your playing time moving forward. So it's kind of a hit or miss. It's always hard to judge. It's like you're playing a team where you're not really putting them away, and then you have to make a decision. Do I take those players out? Am I going to sacrifice maybe winning this game because my starting 11 isn't playing that well? So it depends. It's always hard to say, like if you want to just focus on your starting 11, because you don't want to overwork them, and you also want to be able to have team chemistry no matter who you put in. So I think that's hard sometimes when it comes to that type of decision making.
Of course, and that balance of minutes can be quite difficult, because I had a team which I was managing, and my assistant manager looked at the minutes, and we were tracking minutes for every game we were playing, and it was really good. And it helped us get into a mindset of supporting all our players to try and give them equal playing time, and it was really good. But it also was detrimental, because now I've gone to more of a competitive team, and although we're looking at development to try and get players into the first team, it was difficult, because then I'm going, all right, I need to take someone so off to give him 45 minutes. But I'm like, he doesn't really deserve to lose 45 minutes just because I have to make an equal playing time change. And that can be difficult to take minutes off players who deserve those minutes in that sense, because he's been at training more, he's the more technical player, he's the one who's got the start, but I've got to take him off to supplement 45 minutes for this player because they're going to come back and start moaning if they don't. And it's hard, because you're looking at that player development, but then you're like, these players actually deserve more minutes than you in that sense. And that's the difficult thing about coaching.
Right. And I think that you want to reward players who have been working hard, but I think it's just a matter of finding the balance. And I think that's why I focus so much on development, because I've been in situations where I wished I would have developed a player more, because when it came to making a tough decision, If that player would have been developed a little bit more, maybe they would have been ready to step up into that starting role when we needed them most, especially going into playoffs. I don't ever want to be in a situation where you may have a starting center back or like a key position that's where there may have been an injury leading up to playoffs, and I need another person to step up in that position, but they weren't developed enough to be there, so it's questionable, and you're having to just put your best athletic player back there. So that's why I really focus on the development, the individual development of each player, so they can not only trust me, but I can trust them when it comes to making those lineup decisions. If there's an injury in a certain situation.
Of course, and it's hopefully it works out for you for the season ahead, and I wish you the very best of luck with the pre-season and how it goes. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, especially if you're going away and trying to have a break. But before you go, Ebony, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Fab. If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what would they be?
I guess caring, outgoing, and energetic.
Yeah, love that. Good 3 words. You're in the land of opportunity, so it would maybe seem. It's definitely a place I would love to go, America. But if you had the chance of moving to any other country, where would it be and why?
Out of the country?
Yeah, out of the country. Any country in the world.
That's a good question. I would say maybe the Bahamas. Maybe the Bahamas. I think that I like islands. So I think it'd be nice to wake up and be on an island every day. You're always in like some sort of hot weather. You're not far from the beach. So I think it'd be kind of awesome to wake up and just, be oceanside every day.
And in that sense then, say you moved to the Bahamas, would you be willing to sacrifice a full-time coaching job to live in the Bahamas and do something different?
I guess it depends on what I'm going to the Bahamas for. Because obviously I probably would have moved to the Bahamas for an opportunity. So I think if going to the Bahamas was for coaching, yes. Like, regardless if it's part-time or what. But yeah, I think that would be a dream to do.
Love it. Hopefully it'll work out, and who knows what will happen. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Probably Anson Dorrance. He's a legend. I think he's been coaching for so many years, has so many accolades behind his name, the winningest coach in NCAA history. I think it'd be great to just learn from him, even if it's for 24 hours, just learn from him.
Sounds fascinating and definitely a good one. Who was or is your role model?
Role model. Is this just in general or someone coaching wise?
You could either or both.
I'll do one in coaching. Andy McNabb, he was a coach that I worked under when I first started coaching on the D2 level. He taught me a lot. So I think I consider him my mentor because he's always someone that I can, when it comes to things that I'm unsure about, I know he'll give me an honest opinion and I know he'll speak from a logical standpoint. So yeah, I would say Andy is.
That's great to have a personal role model in terms of someone who's helped shape you and is there for you. I think that's great to have. Say you're a younger self and you've got 2 cards in front of you. One is going to say, right, you're going to have a full-time career as a full-time professional footballer, or one as a full-time coach and without playing and just coaching right from this age until you decide otherwise. Which one would you choose?
Probably as a coach. I know that's hard. That's really hard. Yeah, probably as a coach, because since I love it so much now, I probably would have been like, okay, like that, like a full-time professional coach, like I would love to do that. Because it's different perspective from when you're a player to when you're a coach.
Absolutely, and that's the one thing that I struggle with if I go back playing, because I'll switch off if I'm in the middle of the game because I want to be putting players into different positions and making changes.
Right. You're going to be coaching anyway, so
yeah,
you might as well go coaching route.
If you could give one top tip to any coach, what would it be?
One top tip. Let me think a little bit. I would just say be a player coach. Be a coach who really cares about the player beyond the field. Yes, you want to see the player succeed on the field, but if they don't know that you care about them off the field, I don't think you'll ever get through to them or see them reach their fullest potential.
Great, I love that. If you had the choice of one job in the world, and it could be any job, say US national team or club level, or it might be a perfect university, what job would you take?
I would want to be a D1 coach at a Power 5 school.
So not the US national team or the Chelsea women's?
No, I really feel like, of course, the U.S. national team would be nice, but I think if I had to choose any job at this point of where my life is, it would be a head coach at a Power 5 D1.
Love that. Interesting. If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing?
Probably teaching.
Yeah.
Elementary.
And if you weren't coaching soccer, what other sport would you coach?
If I wasn't coaching soccer, basketball.
Yeah, sounds good. And the final one, what is the one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
The one thing I enjoy most is being able to see players' development. Like when you're as a college coach, when you see a player develop from their freshman year to their senior year, I think it's very rewarding, and it makes it feel like you didn't fail them.
I love that. And well, that's a fantastic episode and insights into who Ebony is and her playing style and where she's come from in terms of that coaching journey to where she wants to go, how she supports and works with her players, her philosophy, her style of play, how she sets up team, her interchanging principles, how she supports coaches, what she's learned. Well, I really appreciate it, especially when you've planned some downtime and still getting soccer in. But it's been fantastic to certainly sit back, and I've made some notes as you've been speaking, and I do apologise for that. But, it'd be great to sort of catch up at the end of your season or when, the time is available to actually have that reflection and to sort of talk from where we are now to where that'll be. And now I think that'll be good to look back on the season and what you've done and how that may have gone.
Of course. Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy some good downtime and it goes well for you. But thank you very much from me.
Thank you so much, Luca. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.